So after the absolute war that we had in the comments last time, I'm maybe going to add a bit of fuel to the fire this time around because there's an article on Reddit that poses some really interesting questions and also offers some insights into what's wrong, maybe a little bit of what's right, and what's complicated with the way that tenants and landlords and housing is set up here in the city. So I thought it would be really interesting to get into together this time. My name is Elon Portnoy, and for the last 10 years, I've been helping renters, landlords, as well as obviously people who are looking to purchase and sell real estate. I now run my own team here in the city. If you want to connect with me, the link is the first one in the description below. Let's get right into it. So the title of this video is, Am I the A-hole? I think I broke my landlord's brain. I have been in this rental for 3 years now, and recently my landlord basically decided to raise my rent by 5%. So 5% may sound like a lot and may sound like a little, but principle is principle, right? You're raising my rent, so I'm gonna at least do my due diligence and see what the place is worth, and then we can take it from there, right? I think that's reasonable both from a landlord and a tenant perspective. I started looking elsewhere, and there are nearly identical units in my building on different floors renting for 10% lower rent, and this dude thinks raising rent by 5% is a good idea. So I get raising rent as much as anybody, right? Landlords' expenses go up. Unless the interest rates are dropping and you have a renewal and you've been paying it off, your monthly costs could go down. But if we're talking about the average scenario, maintenance fees are going up, property taxes going up, insurance payments are going up. Most of the time, we understand where the landlord is coming from if they're giving reasonable increases. And tenants most of the time expect them coming in as well, right? No harm, no foul, usually, as long as they're reasonable, that being the key word. So in an environment we have like right now, where since fall of 2023, rental rates are dropping on average, this might come as a little bit of a surprise, right? So I don't necessarily blame this guy for being surprised that all of a sudden, 3 years later, the landlord jacks rent by 5%. It's also weird that they weren't doing small increases for the last 3 years and all of a sudden it's happening. So maybe that's a little bit of lack of strategy on the landlord side. Who knows? So I shared the links to those units and said rent for similar units is XYZ. I don't agree with you raising the rent. And he pushes back. Here's the main problem. Both me and my partner work in tech and have a high household income. We can easily afford this rent and he knows it. We can still rent because we love to live in this area and plan to buy a detached directly when we have a kid. Until then, no reason to leave the city. So very common scenario, right? People like the condo life until the condo life no longer suits them. Usually that happens when you have either the first or the second kid. As someone who lives in a condo, has lived in a condo for a long time in different buildings, you don't see a lot, especially here in the city of Toronto, especially where I am, south of Etobicoke. You don't see a lot of kids, to be honest with you, not a lot of teenagers. You do see some babies and toddlers, but usually at some point people are making the move, especially from the newer condos, because they're also a lot smaller, as we know, in their floor plan compared to the newer buildings. So very classic situation here. There's no reason to leave. You love the city, you love the accessibility and amenities, but at some point you outgrow the space, usually when a kid comes along. So no surprise there. He keeps saying, come on, man, you work at XYZ, a household name American tech company. This rent increase is nothing for you. So this is the part that bugs me a lot, right? Whether it's right or wrong to raise rent in general, it really shouldn't matter how good the tenant has it or how bad they have it. First of all, somebody doing well doesn't mean it's going to be the same tomorrow. There are layoffs, there are all sorts of things. But even aside from that, why is it your business, right? There's nothing you actually need to know about the tenant's position other than that it's stable and money is rolling in at a stable rate so that they can afford the rent. But to say that you work here and your income is good, so this increase is nothing for you, I think that's a little bit tipping the line for me. But I could be wrong on that. Let me know what you think in the comments. He is not wrong, but I let it slide last year, but this year it's pissing me off. It's like he's taking advantage of me. Now it's become a matter of principle. So I found another unit in the building, applied and got it 10% lower rent. I gave this guy 60 days notice in advance saying we're moving out December 1st. The dude loses his mind. So it's one thing that, you give the tenant notice, and obviously if they're okay with it, they're okay with it, that's it, and that's that. You don't know how they feel about it, right? Because even some tenants, they're going to take stuff from the landlord because they don't want to cause a fuss or make a fight, because they also don't want a bad relationship with the landlord, but the tenant might well be annoyed, right, from a landlord's perspective. I don't think the commenters even know yet, but my wife and I are mom and pop landlords too. Like we have skin in the game, and we're not new to any of this. So that's why we can genuinely understand both perspectives of this. And the guy losing his mind after the tenant, got back to you with comparables, right? Scientific facts, data, this is what's going in the building. This is why I don't want the jack up of 5%. So you have your chance, right, to remedy the situation. If you really are concerned with the tenant leaving and moving on, then you could have said, you know what, you're right? I'm lucky that I'm already getting 10% above what the market is right now. Let's leave it, and I want you to stay. But that didn't happen. So then you can't get mad when the tenant walks. I think that's a reasonable take. You can't get mad when the tenant walks. So he's like, fine, I will let you stay until April for the same rent. So it's too late, right? The tenant didn't write you to say, I think I'm leaving, or I applied for a place. He got it, right? So the deal is done. To say, fine, I'll let you stay now makes no sense because you already made the decision. I was kind of annoyed by I will let you stay as if he's being generous. I just told him no, I've already signed the documents for the new place. He now gets back to me in a wave of texts. First it was, who moves out in December? You should have let me know in advance. And then, I had to renew my mortgage with a higher rate, and it costs a lot to keep this unit. I'm not being greedy. So again, this isn't me saying I don't see where the landlord is coming from. There's a good chance that obviously we have an increased interest rate environment right now, and their rate probably did go up. And having had to renew, we see a lot of landlords even have to sell the unit in distress because they either can't qualify at the new rent or just can't hack the monthly payments. And maybe the tenant's been in there a while and has a pretty low rental rate themselves. So maybe, tenants would rather the landlord jack the rent a little bit than sell in distress, and then the tenant has to move, not wants to move. So again, I'm just showing both sides of the coin because there are two sides to this coin, right? When I say our last video just blew up in the comments, it didn't even end there. I'm getting emails about the thing with people, arguing the landlord side and arguing the tenant side. So it's a controversial issue. Honestly, my job on this channel is to keep a rather neutral stance. Why? Because I want to bring people together. I know it sounds silly to say, but there's so much divisiveness already. If we can be us together versus the issue rather than us versus ourselves, me versus someone else, let's stand on the same side of the line and let's look at the issues together, because we all want the system to be better. We all want things to be better. We want tenants to have more safety, and I don't think any tenants expect reasonably that landlords are not going to treat it a little bit like a business, at least in the fact that it has to be sustainable. Otherwise, they can't provide the roof over the head that the tenant needs to have housing. So let's keep going here. And even maintenance has gone up significantly, so that's why I had to increase rent. I don't buy that. This is a brand new unit. I'm the first renter, but in 2022 or so, how can it go up in 3 years? This is not necessarily correct. We have seen units maintenance fees go up within the first few years. Actually, it's not uncommon because the first year is it's not based on reality, right? It's not based on how much you need for the reserve fund. It's based on projections. You think that you're going to need a certain amount, so that's what you end up charging. But it could well be that, especially post-pandemic, your expenses are a lot different now than what you accounted for. And the money does have to come from somewhere. So whether it's right or wrong, I'm just saying that there are a lot of scenarios where between 2022 and 2025, the maintenance fee could feasibly have gone up. I'm not saying it did in this building. I don't know this building. I haven't looked into it, but there is a possibility. So, how he doesn't buy it because it's a brand new unit. You can buy it or not, but that does happen, just to let you know. The dude is going through all phases of grief right now. I was a great renter, never complained. My partner is a near freak, so our apartment was spotless. We were never late on rent, etc. And I have to say, for us landlords, this is basically the idea of a dream tenant that we're talking about here, right? This is what we want, especially in a place like this where we already get almost no protections as landlords. You want a tenant that's, partner is a near freak, so the apartment is spotless, never being late on rent. This is the kind of person who you keep a good relationship with. Look, I'm not saying never to raise rent, but if you do raise it and they push back that rent in the building is 10% lower, then I think that the right business decision there for us landlords is to leave it be and leave a good tenant like this in, if in fact this is all the case, right? The landlord might have their own thing where they say you're not as good as you think you are. That's a whole different story. But if in fact it is the case, then I do think that. His attempt to raise rent on an already inflated rent and you work for XYZ, this is nothing for you, is what pissed me off. Totally with you there. Like, very valid to be pissed off at those things, I would say. Let me know if I'm wrong. He's now realizing there are like 4 other nearly identical units in the tower for like 10% lower rent. They have been sitting for 2 months. And he's having a hard time finding anyone. He most likely will have to keep it empty until December and January and lose a couple of months' rent and then get someone that pays significantly lower rent. So I'm not going to beat this drum too much in this video, but there's an epidemic with landlords who hypothetically should be running it like a business. And by the way, I encourage running it like a good, solid business, right? Doing analysis and making strategic decisions and running things correctly. That's not in every landlord's forte here. And there's one thing to jack the rent and not get it, but then you're renting out the unit again. And you have a choice. Do I go for the rent that I wanted, or do I meet the market and go for that? And if you're the kind of landlord that's going for over market in a market like this that's slower, I can't feel that bad for you, right? First of all, even in a good market for landlords, a landlord's market, we recommend staying maximum at market rent, if not a little bit below it, because it's so important to find a good tenant. In this climate, that's 10 times more important than it is in a landlord's market. In a tenant's market, you absolutely need to be going for someone who's good. And people who are good also know their worth and value, right? And they're not going to overpay. So this is a recipe for disaster. You're having it sitting for 2 months. I guarantee in a case like this, the person that's going to apply is also going to be a bad tenant and give you a bad experience, because that's just how these things go here. Am I the a-hole for moving out in December or not choosing to stay until April? It's not a lot of burden financially until then, but something in me just snapped and I was like, I am done with this guy. So I think I've given my perspectives enough in this video. I do have to say I mostly side with the tenant here. Is there a case to be made for the landlord potentially? Sure, right? It's not like we can't see things from their perspective whatsoever. Your mortgage amount went up, your maintenance fees might have gone up, your property tax almost definitely has gone up, your insurance probably has gone up. So to say that you're making as much money, let's say that you were either at least breaking even or getting positive cash flow, that might not be the case today if it was the case before. Or if you were already losing money, now you're probably losing more money and it's tough to stomach. At the same time, these are the risks that come with being a landlord. And if you are truly trying to run it like a business, which again, we encourage in the right way, right? The right way, by the way, is fair for landlords and tenants. That's what a good business does. Then you wouldn't be making decisions like this person is making, right? They didn't even start negotiating for a rate of 10% lower because that's what was going in the building. All they said was, we want to keep it the same. We just don't want you to jack it by 5%. That was already too much for this landlord. So anyway, let us know what you think in the comments, right? As usual, we really want to get a conversation going, but we also want the different perspectives and opinions. I think it helps when the conversation is flooded with a lot of different unique viewpoints, because it doesn't help anyone to just say, yeah, these people are right, because there's a lot of upset people on the other side who are saying you're. So let's get on the same page, right? Not even get on the same side. I don't even like looking at it as two different sides, believe it or not. You know, we're all people and we're all on the same. A person who's a tenant now can be a landlord tomorrow, and a person who's a landlord now can lose their place and be a tenant tomorrow. We're all the same. So we already are on the same side. So let's act like it. And anyways, that's it for me. By the way, if you could drop a like and subscribe to the channel, it really helps us a lot.